All right, everybody, we're back. Another episode, another solo episode tonight. I know I put out, I think four of my last five or six episodes have been solo episodes, and on one hand, I do apologize for that because I think that having guests generally, is better. On the other hand, life is busy. I literally have maybe seven or eight people that are just waiting to just get me a time that they're willing to do that. Yeah, that they're ready to do this. And of course, for most people living their everyday lives, and I totally don't blame them because I would be the same way. Um, you know, so spending 2 hours or an hour and a half doing a podcast to someone that's going to get almost no views in the middle, at a random point in the day, is not necessarily something you're going to put your whole life on hold for. So I do understand, but I do have a couple of very exciting episodes I hope to record soon. I don't want to say anything more than that, not because I'm about keeping secrets, but because I do not want to promise something that doesn't happen. Just like the group episode that ended up getting scrapped. So apologies in advance, but I think the last couple of episodes were at least thought-provoking, mildly entertaining, um, and yeah, that's just a little opening monologue for my very long monologue, I suppose. Um, this was a good week. Um, I am extremely optimistic for this upcoming year. And going into 2025, I felt like it's January 2nd today, and I just felt like I had a lot of very high hopes. And immediately, it feels like 2025 started off with a lot of what 2024 ended with. There was two terrorist attacks, um, and potentially more either happening or being plotted. One was in Las Vegas, Nevada, from my understanding, there was a Tesla Cybertruck that that exploded right outside the Trump Hotel, and apparently um, the Cybertruck was so well built that the explosives inside were not able to kind of penetrate the doors and the bottom of the Cybertruck, and only the top went flying up. And apparently, the walls of the lobby of the Trump Hotel weren't even broken, which which is crazy. The glass did not even shatter in the lobby that was just a couple of feet away from this big explosion. And then today, just a couple of minutes ago, apparently, there was this new twist that the person that was in the Tesla was found with a gunshot to the head prior to the explosion, which means he was killed, planted there, which doesn't really make sense, or killed himself before the gun, before the explosion, and I guess unalived himself, as Tim Dillon would say. Um, or I don't even know. And apparently, Elon Musk has. I guess the other good news about Elon Musk having an enormous amount of company and being, generally speaking, from my understanding, from what all signs seem to indicate to me, is not a corrupt individual. Um, does things a little bit too whimsically, but he's proven it to be dedicated to humanity, to the truth, to uh, humanity, to to truth that's convenient for him in terms of narrative, and then truth in general, which I think is very, very important. And to remember also that he's a human and that we're all humans, and um, you know, and he now, and because he has access to so much data and so much information, because he's in charge of so many companies, so many amazing companies that are so renowned and so successful, he has a lot of tools at his hands. And if another company, I don't even want to throw out any names because I don't want to make it seem like, sure, why not actually Boeing? You never know. Say they, hypothetically had information about why something bad happened, would happen if a door of a plane flew off mid-flight, or if there's an engine malfunction or something like that. They would probably have the ability to get to the bottom of it if they really wanted to, and and find out what was going on. Elon Musk, from my understanding, is that Tesla records pretty much everything. Um, on the road and potentially in the car. I don't remember. I don't know. He made it seem that way because he just posted on Twitter just a couple of minutes ago that they're going to, or maybe an hour or two ago. I'm not sure, but recently, within the last day or half a day, that they've acquired the security footage, the camera footage from that actual Cybertruck, and yeah, and they're going to see what happened. But I mean, there's someone that's going to carry out a terrorist attack in a Cybertruck or in any Tesla, are they not aware that everything's being recorded all the time? Maybe they're really not. I don't know. And the other question would be, or did maybe they pick the Tesla because Tesla's, and actually I know this because I was considering leasing one or buying one. Um, they're very expensive they're very expensive to insure because apparently they're very flammable, and they and apparently it's just very expensive to maintain it, and if anything goes wrong, it goes wrong in a big way. Maybe that made the Tesla kind of car a better target for explosives, because if it's going to already be flammable, if the battery that it uses for instead of an engine is combustive, is flammable, then it may make for a better, for a better car to try to blow up. I don't know. And then you have the guy, and then you have the terrorist in New Orleans that on New Year's Eve, I think at 3 o'clock in the morning, ran over or used a pickup truck that he rented on Turo, which is the car renting app that my buddy Steve Profit actually uses. Actually, I forgot to text him about that. I got to send him a text and just say, "Yo, make sure no one does anything with any of your Turo cars." But um, yeah, and then and I kind of was getting freaked out. I don't really know what's going on. I'm not freaked out. I'm freaked out because it's sad and it's terrible, and it feels like it could have been avoided, and it feels like it is avoidable. And on one hand, you have people like Shawn Ryan, for example, who had on his podcast a couple of weeks ago, and I remember listening to it and thinking, like, it's like she sound. I'm sorry, I didn't clarify. Shawn Ryan on his podcast had someone on. I forgot her name. I have to look her up after. I'll post the link to the show in the show note captions, where she actually walks through what which terrorist groups do what kind of training and how they're all connected to one another. And she predicted, essentially, like a month ago, she predicted an attack extremely similar to this nature, and it seems like people knew about it. It seems like people know about it. And then you have journalists like who I truly respect, like Glenn Greenwald, who I don't know if I agree with everything he says, but I do respect the work that he does, and I do respect his opinion. Who says that who posted recently, and again I could be misunderstanding what his post was, but in essence, posting on Twitter or on X rather, that after 20 years of being told that Islam and Muslims in the Middle East are the problem, when in the early 2000s that narrative was completely concocted just for the sake of war. He's like, how long will it take for people to notice that the exact same playbook is happening again, and this is an ISIS flag here, and this is American who happens to have a Muslim, Arabic or Islamic name. And he's like, so what is this the same playbook over again? And then you have the stories of bird pox or whatever it's called that seems to be developing too, and that sounds like it could be real, and also sounds like another playbook play because we just had COVID, and it just the problem in my head, and this isn't even anything what I wanted to talk about, but I guess now that I'm here, the problem in my head, I have a hard time believing that conspiracy theories crazy conspiracies just keep manifesting themselves. Let's say hypothetically the COVID thing, which I think I'd be comfortable saying that I believe, was some kind of leak. What there was something. It was being developed. It was being studied. It got and it got leaked. I don't know whether it got leaked intentionally or not, but do you know that it was being researched? Do you know that it was basically it was essentially man-made, and I just have a very hard and then okay, fine. So you want to say that this was a scheme to kind of shut down the government or see or not sorry, shut down the states and give more power to the government. And you want to say that you want to see how many people would comply and how many people wouldn't and what it would be like. And for vaccine companies to make blah blah. I mean, sure, maybe. Let's say you go ahead and you check off every single box on the COVID conspiracy checklist, right? And some conspiracies, of course, are more compelling than others. I have a very hard time believing that because everyone on the planet is talking about it and everyone on the planet is hearing about it and everyone on the planet seems to be on the relatively similar page, at least in terms of the COVID vaccine, as opposed to the origins of COVID or the nefarious intent behind its wide mass spread. Um, I have a hard time believing that someone's going to go, oh, it's a really good plan. Maybe a year later doing the exact same evil conspiracy. Like, what? Everyone's on you. Everyone's talking about it. It just happens. Everyone's suspicious. So on one hand, I have a very difficult time believing that whatever nefarious forces or whatever corrupt people or whatever crooked politicians or world leaders or deep state or whatever you want to call it, I have a hard time believing that they're so brilliant that they come up with this original plan that, you know, they decide after that original plan that they're going to stop using their brains and stop using their heads and just start um, and just do the exact same playbook. Take the lazy way out. It feels weird to me. It does not feel like something that that it does. That's kind of if you want to just go with intuition and you want to go with your gut and your instinct. If you're so smart to plan something so manipulative and so evil, and then there's such a simple question that kind of that throws the whole thing off the rails, then I don't know. It doesn't seem like a very good conspiracy to me. But the other problem is that I am not a very good judge of this kind of content because I know how limited I am in my way of thinking about these things. And I got into an argument with my mom years ago, 2021, 2022, about the vaccine because I'd taken two Moderna shots. I think it was Moderna. I wanted to go with my buddy Zach Alexander to Ireland. Um, and we wanted to be able to travel. We wanted to be able to have a good time. And I was like, there's no way that someone is going to go and just rip off billions of people, that one organization, and that everyone's in it, and it's evil conspiracy for something that doesn't work or that could be detrimental, and that billions of people are being lied to, and everyone's getting injured. And I remember fighting with about this to my mom at the Shabbos table on I think it was Friday. It was no, it was Saturday day while we were having lunch, and I was so frustrated because I was like, "What do you mean? Like this has been going on forever, and like obviously that's not the case. It doesn't make any sense." And and then I was wrong, and then I was wrong. It was plain and simple, and a lot of that corruption has been brought to light. So obviously I've been wrong before, and obviously I have no problem, and I really don't mind being wrong because I'm more interested in learning than I am in being right. And I would much rather understand things better or more completely than insist that I'm right about whatever it is that I'm bickering with someone about. And whatever it is I'm bickering with someone about. And also, another reason why is because I was texting my buddy Guy today about this recent development with the Tesla Cybertruck, where the guy was found with a bullet, with the bullet hole in his head, and my immediate thought was he had to have been killed, no question about it. And then Guy immediately responds to me, maybe he unalived himself, and that thought did not cross my mind for half a second, and I was like, "What are you talking about, man?" And then I was like, "But also." I didn't even think about that. So there's so many different ways that, and that's that's kind of why I love. It's not kind of why. That's absolutely why I love listening to podcasts, and I love learning. I love figuring. I love hearing new perspectives, because I find that there's so many times where I'm so confident in something, and I think I have it deduced, and I think I have it worked out, and I'm just really missing a whole another way of looking at it. And there's so many different ways of looking at things. Um, so at the end of the day, all this is doing, the last 15 minutes of me talking, 60 minutes of me talking, is just paranoid anxiety. And I'm probably going to be wrong about most of this stuff anyway, because a million things are gonna happen. A million people are going to say things that I was like, oh wait, maybe that makes sense. Maybe that's right. Maybe that's right. And that is why I need to get off Twitter, and I need to get off X. I had a bunch of friends over last night, and we were hanging out in the backyard, having some wine, some beer, cigars. A couple of people brought guitars. Someone brought a little percussion instrument. It wasn't exactly a drum. One of those Middle Eastern, like you find in the shuk or the market kind of drum thing. And we're all hanging out. And I'm talking to I'm talking to a guy, one of my buddies, and I was like, I go crazy from being on Twitter. I go nuts. And he's like, well, don't use it. And he's like, I feel the same way. He goes, just don't use it. And I was like, but it's my news source. And he said, yeah. He said, but you do know that at the end of the day, the things that you're going to have to fight, like the stuff that is newsworthy, the stuff that's important, you're going to get to. Like you're going to hear it. You're going to hear it from friends. You're going to hear it from family. You're going to hear it from podcasts. You're going to hear it from something else. It doesn't have to just be that you're just scrolling on Twitter, waiting for the news waiting to see each spectacle of breaking news. And he's right, which is crazy because it's such a good argument that I built for myself that this is like the source of news, and I just check. What am I doing? What's the problem with being informed? What's the problem with being up to date? What's the problem with spending probably an hour and a half more, an hour and a half, or I don't think an hour and a half, between an hour and a half on it a day, which is a lot. Uh, I have my I have my daily usage set for 45 minutes for between Twitter and Instagram. And in an ideal world, I would like to probably spend 40 minutes on Twitter a day and 5 minutes on Instagram. I don't think I need much more than that. But he's right. And I texted him, I texted him after later on at night while I was thinking about it. I'm like, you're 100% correct about it, because now I just feel dumb about the fact that I'm on Twitter so much. And you think, well, it's still fun. Like there is definitely the engaging and entertaining component to it, that it is fun. Like don't. But if you just feel like you're unhappy with the amount of time you're spending on it, or the way that you're feeling after you being on it, don't think that it's a utility that you absolutely need. You'll hear about it. You'll hear about whatever you have to hear about. You'll know whatever you have to hear about, and not even to not be on Twitter, just to not be on it as much, or X, this whole time. I hope everyone knows that when I say Twitter, I'm really referring to X. I'm not a Twitter or X 1.0 fan. I've never been on it actually, so I don't know. But I do really also think that the same like, just because listen, this news is obviously not good news, and I don't care whether it's as surface level as a terrorist attack, or as conspiratorial as some massive deep state psyop operation to get us to go to war with to get America to go to war with Iran. Like at the end of the day, it wasn't a very good way for 2025 to begin, and because of that, it is sad, and it is something to think about. But if you were as optimistic as I was, or I am, then this just feels like another one of the same problems that we've been having for the last bunch of years, and we knew that something was likely going to happen before Trump was going to get was inaugurated, because I mean you had such a massive influx of people that we don't know who they are. That I mean, there's no way that you could have 4 years of a massive influx of people and 100% of them are good apples. It just I don't think it's possible. I don't think however many millions of people came into the country, if you want to say 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, I don't know, all these crazy numbers. If that was, if that's the case, even if it's 5 million, you can't import 5 million people without one person being a not good person, especially if none of them have been, um, especially if none of them have been, we don't know who they are, essentially. So, I mean, it's not a surprise. And if you were optimistic, I believe I'm still optimistic. I still think that this is a symptom of a previous problem and if we were excited for the problems to be resolved and the problems to be fixed, then we should be as excited, because our administration, the new administration, hasn't had any time to do anything yet. They're not even in office yet. So right now, while it seems like they're the ones in charge, they couldn't be less in charge. They know they have the people's approval. They know they have the Senate and the House. They know they have the popular vote and the electoral vote. They know how much of a change we need. And there's 2.5 months of them them not being able to do anything. So keep our heads up. I'll keep my head up. It'll be okay. That was I literally was planning on talking about that for 5 minutes. I didn't even think about that. But I didn't even think that I was going to go that far into it. But I started a new book that was recommended, not to me personally, but was recommended by Andrew Huberman. And I'm super excited about it because I there's so much promise already. The book, I forgot who the authors are, but it's The Courage to Be Disliked, which is an awesome title for a couple of reasons. I was talking to and we're starting this in class, but obviously the notion of the courage to be disliked is such a cool concept, because I feel like people are split between wanting to fit in and wanting, social approval or wanting societal approval, and actually finding their own way. And there's a very, very delicate and fine line to walk where you can really authentically be yourself and also kind of get people's approval. It's a really hard thing to do, and especially if you're starting from the point of you want to get people's approval more than you want to be yourself, and risk having other people not like you, because other people not liking you is essentially what we feel is a rejection of the totality of our existence. And when people don't like us, we've even though the thing that they might be judging whether or not they like us on is no relationship to reality at all, right? I was talking to my students about this. I was like, listen, I was like, I know me because I've been me, right? I'm me for 29 years. I'm with me all day, every day. The way that I perceive myself and the way that I perceive um, my actions and understand who I am and understand my history and understand where I want to go and where I'm heading. You're not privy to all of that. And I was telling my students, I was like, you guys, I have you guys for 40 minutes a day for 4 days a week at best. And most of the time, the conversation is generally revolving around you guys. Um, and even though you know me for a long period of time, how much do you actually know me? I mean, you don't really know me that well. So if you think I'm a great guy, that's not necessarily the case. If you think I'm an awful guy, that's not necessarily the case either. And you're not going to know. And I have to be comfortable with myself, saying I know who I am and I'm comfortable with myself, despite other people's approval of me, because their approval of me is determined by something that's probably relatively surface or not even necessarily true. And I think that that's just a really interesting notion. Even before you get to any of the content of the book, just the title in and of itself is "The Courage to Be Disliked." It takes great courage in yourself to know that if you are disliked, that it's probably not you really, and it shouldn't prevent you from being you, and it shouldn't prevent you, and it shouldn't make you feel worse about yourself. Now, if you do want other people to like you, and you do want, and it does make a difference to you, then there are things obviously you can do to win it back. But you have to be comfortable saying, listen, I know I'm the one that has to live with me every day. I'm the one that has to live with trying to accomplish my goals, and I'm dealt with the particular cards that hand that I'm dealt, and I'm the only one that could do anything with it. So guess what? I'm really sorry if you like me or don't like me, but I've got to do what I've got to do. I don't think a lot of people think like that, and I think that the downfall of thinking like that is obviously that if you don't care about what other people think enough, you end up awfully lonely. You end up without allies, without relationships, without community. You end up without being able to find people to work with you that can complement areas of your life that you are not as successful in. You know, it would be very silly of me to alienate my friends that are detail oriented and my friends that are better than me at any given thing because I'll never figure anything out. I can never ask for help. I can never grow. I can never learn from experience. I can never learn. I deprive myself of unbelievable resources and unbelievable potential relationships. And I myself can prove to myself to be a wonderful resource and a wonderful friend, I hope, to anyone that I feel good about, that I approve of. Um, but the book is so the book is written. It's really incredible. The book is written as a conversation, and it's really fun. It's actually one of the only books. It's one of two books, I think, that are kind of written this way in terms of describing a philosophy, not in terms of just laying out a bunch of facts or studies or information, but laying out a philosophy in the form of a conversation with two people challenging one another in order to get the point across. And I think it's fun because it gives the author the opportunity to ask the questions that he knows or she knows that you'll ask, and that the author has considered what you're asking already, and has a response to that, and so it makes it accessible to more people. It makes it more digestible, in my opinion, because there tends to be more breaks and gaps and smaller paragraphs and smaller bits of information to process, as opposed to thick and uh, dense sentences, paragraphs, chapters, or whole sections and segments of different books. And I think the book is written. Just the formatting of the book is like that. The other book is by a Jewish rabbi from the 1800s named Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, Samson Raphael Hirsch, who is just beyond incredibly eloquent. I've spoken about him before. Uh, he's one of my. I mean, a lot of what he said. He's my hero when it comes to philosophy of education and enthusiasm and zeal and passion for life. And he does it. I mean, he's German, and so he writes in German, of course. But that means his work is much more easily translated to English. And he almost wrote his essays like a combination of philosophy and poetry, which is really really fun because on one hand, it's beautiful to read and it's fun. And on the other hand, it's thought provoking as well. And a lot of times, words are just appealing for this, just because they kind of flow together well. Bob Dylan is the king and Van Morrison's pretty good at it too. There's a lot of great singer songwriters or poets that their words kind of fit together. And it speaks to you and it makes sense to you, but you can't really explain what the idea is behind it. And I've tried this. There's certain Bob Dylan songs that I find to be so beautiful, or Springsteen songs, that I find to be just breathtaking and mesmerizing, and I wish I could write like that. And this poetry is beautiful. And my students like, so what does he mean by that? And I'm like, I don't know what he means like that by that. I just know that one of my favorite verses from Mr. Tambourine Man is an amazing Bob Dylan song. It was Steve Jobs' favorite song, I believe, and the verse goes to stand beneath the oh man, take me disappearing through the smoke rings of my mind, down the foggy ruins of time, way past the frozen leaves, down to the windy beach, far from the twisted reach of crazy sorrows. Yes, to dance beneath the diamond sky with one hand waving free, silhouetted by the sea, circled by the circus sands, with our memory and fate driven deep beneath the waves. Let me forget about today until tomorrow. If I got any of that wrong, even though I think I got that all right, it's because I'm saying that off the top of my head. It sounds beautiful. Yes, to dance beneath the diamond sky with one hand waving free, silhouetted by the sea, circled by the circus sands. And my students are like, what does that mean? I'm like, I don't know, but I kind of just like it just invokes the feeling of hope and enthusiasm, and to dance. You're dancing, diamonds are in the sky, so it shows that there's value up in the sky. Circled by the circus, and I don't know what that means. I don't know any, I mean, but it kind of it makes sense to you. But in regards to this book and the other book that I'm thinking of, called The 19 Letters, um, so both both the case in the case of both the books, the courage to be disliked and the 19 letters. I'll post the show link captions. At least I'll post the books in the show link captions. Um, Shoot, now I'm gonna. Oh, just kidding. I have a pencil. I'm gonna write that down. 19 letters, courage, and then Shawn Ryan episode for show note captions. Okay. Um, and Glenn Greenwald. Why not get involved in here? And I respect his open-mindedness and his amazing work that he does. So thank you for all the work that you guys do, Shawn Ryan and Glenn Greenwald, and Andrew Huberman, and everyone else that contributes. So anyway, so so this book is is a conversation between a philosopher and a young man who comes to challenge the philosopher, because the philosopher's perspective, which is based in psychotherapy, which is based in what's called Alderian. The guy's name was Alderian psychology, is that the world is simple and everyone has the potential to be happy at any given moment. And I haven't gone all the way through the book, so I can't pretend to give away any super secret answers to what makes happiness and what how life is simple. I don't have those answers for you, unfortunately. But one of the things that the book did talk about, which I found myself to be very torn by, was the philosopher's rejection of the notion of trauma. And the philosopher seems to claim that trauma, that traumatic events, while they are challenging, are interpreted by our brains as an event that will help us achieve a certain goal. I hope I'm explaining this well, and I hope I'm saying this right. And if not, I'm going to have to apologize, and I'm going to have to post another episode link to make up for it, because I do not want to. I do not want to misspeak, and I don't want to, misrepresent what the book was saying. From my understanding, what I was reading, that let's say, for example, I don't want to get out of bed, and the previous night I drank too much and I have a hangover, right? And I can't get out of bed because I have a hangover, and and my body's traumatized, and I need the rest. I need to recover. You know, my brain, me, as someone whose initial desire was to not get out of bed anyway, interpreted something that happened to me not as a not as a traumatic event, but as an excuse to be able to accomplish what I want to accomplish. And if something were to come up that was of a higher priority, for example, say I had a flight to catch and I was extremely hungover, but I got out of bed early and I made my way to the airport and I made my way to the plane. I may have thrown up in the bathroom on the way to the plane, or I may throw up on the plane on the way to wherever I'm going, but I'm up and I'm out of bed. And so that traumatic event did not prevent me from being able to get out of bed. And the book goes as far as to seem to say, or to say that that when we use events in our lives to justify our actions and our behavior, we fall into the trap of what's called determinism, that everything is pretty much predetermined, and we have no free choice and we have no ability to act in our own way. And there's a really serious argument to be made for that kind of perspective and that kind of thought. But the problem with determinism is that it really does take our ability to take our lives into our own hands. It removes that, or at least it cripples or handicaps it. You know, it's actually funny because this actually has to do, I think, also with the way that we phrase things to ourselves and to other people, using phrases and expressions like "I have to," "She made me," you know, "I don't want to do this, but I will anyway." Using expressions like that take our choice and our freedom, essentially, out of our hands and putting it into the hands of someone else, or another, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be someone that we even know, right? So, for example, when I was in college, I didn't want to take a math class. And instead of saying I have to take math, if I said I want to get my English degree and part of the experience of getting my English degree requires that I take a math class, then what I'm essentially saying is, even though this might not have been my first choice, I want to take the math class because I want the English degree, and the English degree is valuable to me. It's not valuable to anyone else, but it's valuable to me. So, I, so I, so the rejection of trauma, of healing. Sorry, I'm just trying to wrap my head around all this as I'm going. So, rejecting the notion of trauma, not to not say that difficult things don't happen, that bad things don't happen, and that challenges don't exist, but to reject that you have to be a certain way because of an experience that you went through, gives us the opportunity to take our lives into our own hands and to find a way to either navigate a way around our challenge, to navigate, to find an alternative path, other than engaging that exact activity. I have to give an example for this to make any sense. I'm sorry in case this isn't clear. I've said this example before, and I'll probably say it again. I tend to get very overwhelmed with long steps and processes, and I'm not very good at keeping big, long ideas in my head at one time. I'm good at capturing one thing and kind of zooming into it and examining it, and I'm an experiential learner. And I know that I know that when I was in, I think, first grade or second grade, and I was switching schools, the school recommended that I go from first grade to third grade, or something like that, from kindergarten to second grade. I don't know, whatever it may be. I skipped some grade when it was very early, and apparently, it's not a good thing to do. It's always actually probably a little better to hold a kid back than it is to push a kid forward, because pushing a kid forward, even though, obviously there's more material that they may be able to, that they'll be more challenged in school, has a lot of other potential problems. You mature, you're less mature. You may have a harder time connecting with your friends and your peers. You might even have a harder time because your brain is a year behind everyone else's. That there might be certain things you're not going to be as good at because your brain isn't as developed, and that's what happened, I think, to me. Or that's what I understand happened to me. That I've always been the youngest in my class, in my grade, and I I just had a hard time developing that kind of, I don't know whether, whatever it was, I had a hard time with school and processes. And I only realized this about myself. I only realized that the reason why I always had a hard time with formally structured classes and with, step by step by step by step projects or assignments or building new things is could be rooted in this. And as a consequence, I actually failed this book's test, right? Because what I did was I didn't force myself to say, okay, now that I know this about me, how do I deal with it? Instead, I rejected that kind of lifestyle entirely and chose the least formally structured life that I could live while still kind of being secure. So instead of working for a big corporate company, I work with my dad. Instead of having a hobby, like I have a friend, Lippy, that has a hobby where he makes financial models on the side and is building up his own side business. I don't want to go more into that than I have to, in case he gets in trouble. I hope he doesn't, but I hope it's okay I said that. But, so his way of investing his time is it's something that is tangible and structured and will almost certainly have a positive financial net outcome. I am doing this podcast, which has an extremely low. Actually, that's not true. For everyone, it has a very low chance of being successful. I think for me, I have a much higher chance of being successful with it because I feel committed and disciplined to it, and I've been working on my commitment and my discipline for years now, and I'm proud of that. And I think that my discipline and commitment will likely make this podcast, succeed. But at the end of the day, put everything aside, I am choosing this same lifestyle. I never confronted this issue, and so I am kind of living. Like if someone were to say, "Oh yeah, pretty much predetermined that you wouldn't be in a formal job in a big corporate company, playing politics and putting people against each other, or you're striving to make your first million or 2 million or 5 million by the time you're 30 or whatever it is," that was already predetermined. I can't really, I can't really argue with that. There hasn't been so many things that I've done with my life that are really scheduled, except for actually teaching, which is the first time in my professional career I had to be in a particular place at a particular time every single day, or at least 4 days a week. And I had to, and I had responsibilities and it's still, by the way, not easy for me to do. It's not easy for me to prepare classes for every single week. It's not easy for me to be there and to really show up every single day. I force myself to, but it's not something I have a proclivity towards. I don't naturally feel like I want to do that. So I so I don't think this notion of rejecting the idea of trauma as something that rules our behavior sounds a little bit more like a tool to help us break out of it than an actual convincing answer to me. Meaning, I'm in other words, by rejecting trauma, you're not saying that trauma doesn't exist, and you're not even saying that people aren't traumatized. What you're saying is you don't have to play that game. You don't have to you don't have to live your life through those lenses. You could live your life through the lens of, I had a challenging experience I had a difficult experience. The consequence of that is that it's hard for me to want this. It's hard for me to behave like this. It's hard for me to interact with people like that. Whatever the consequences to your trauma are, if you just say that was an unpleasant experience, now I can choose to face it head on and learn tools that work for me, right? Just like hypothetically, and it's funny because I never thought of myself as someone that liked science or that was good at science, and I really, really, really do enjoy it, especially the last couple of years. And I love learning, and I love the way that it's broken down. But I just found out that podcasts were a better form for me to learn, and taking notes and reading these books with a lot of anecdotes and a lot of stories is a lot better way for me to learn this kind of information and process this information than sitting in a formal classroom. And I bet that if given, let's say, a test, and I'm not saying this right now, but if I had to take a test to or write an essay or write several essays to get into grad school for psychology, to display that I know X, Y, and Z about psychology. If I'm able to provide if I'm provided the opportunity to show that I have the same level of information or more as everyone else, even though I didn't go through a particular program or a particular series of steps, I would probably be able to do that. And the truth is that I will end up doing that in my own way, and it won't be done with any kind of formal credentials, and at least it's not likely that it will be. It's not likely to be done with any formal credentials. It's not likely that it will get enormous academic approval within the circles of top educators and scientists, but I'll be able to help the world in the way that I want to be able to help the world, and I have to figure out a way to do it my own way. So the rejection, so if I say I had this challenging experience, I I realize I don't like something a certain way. Now, what am I going to do about it? It puts a lot more power into my hands, and it takes something from being deterministic to giving us a lot more freedom and a lot more will. We had just finished. Today marks the end of the holiday of Hanukkah, um, which is an awesome holiday, although a little strange in terms of what Jews' relationship to it is philosophically and in terms of its history and in terms of its story. Very few people actually know much about it, and I'm not here to be anyone's rabbi or to teach anyone anything or to be the authority on anything, but I did just hear someone that was extremely intelligent, to break it down, and I got a couple of thoughts on on notions that I think are really relevant to everyone. What feels like in the world today, but certainly in the Western world today. Um, and the Hanukkah story is about the Hanukkah story is about how the Greek Empire destroyed or conquered the Jewish Empire and destroyed the what we call the Beit Hamikdash, which is our the holiest place um, for the Jewish people on earth. And it was interesting because the Greeks, because prior to the Greek rule, there was the Babylonian rule, and the Babylonians were more interested in just killing as many Jews as they could. And the Greeks were in the business not of killing Jews, but of killing Judaism. And they didn't care whether a Jew named Benji Goldberg or Jonathan Greenberg was alive or not. They cared whether or not Benji or Jonathan were practicing Jews. And they cared that the notion of individual and independent religion outside of the Greek culture um, that it exists because and I even do understand where the Greeks are coming from. If you're ruling an empire and you're ruling a world, and your means of communication, and you're basically just kind of taking taxes from people and kind of implementing laws, and you sending your policemen to make sure that these things are being carried out. But in order to make sure that people don't revolt, you have to make sure that you get rid of the differences between the two of you, between the two nations. So I certainly don't. I mean, strategically, it is a great move, and for the Jews, they understood at the time that, or at least a small handful of Jews understood at the time that their values were under attack, and and it wasn't just enough that they were alive. And I believe, and I have to go back and check on this historically. I believe the first and second destruction were pretty close together between the Babylonian rule and the Greek rule, and it could be that that the Jews, that were so scared and upset, and and again, how dare I use the word traumatized, from their experience with the Babylonians, that the fact that people were ruling over them, that weren't actively trying to kill them, could have been an enormous relief to an enormous amount of Jews in the world. In fact, it's not too dissimilar from how comfortable the Jews are in the Western world today, relative to, we're just happy that people aren't hunting Jews down in the streets like in Nazi Germany or in Russia or wherever. I mean, throw a dart on a map over the course of history, and I'm sure it'll land on a place that killed or expelled Jews. But we could have been so content and so okay with the fact that we were being ruled by people that didn't want to kill us, that we didn't even realize that we were actually losing the things that made us ourselves. I think that if there's one thing, I've heard people discuss this on a variety of podcasts before. I've heard it mentioned more than once, and I think it's true that part of the reason why the Jews have been around for as long as they have is because we're led by ideals and stories, and ideals and stories don't die, and we have high aspirations for what humanity can achieve, and we have high aspirations for what we can achieve. We have high aspirations for what what could be accomplished in this life, and we care to get there. That's what we want. We just want to get. We just want the world to be a better place than it was yesterday. And we want our lives. We want our we care about we want our families and our kids and our communities and everyone to be healthy and to do well and to care, and it all revolves around life. It all revolves around growth and life, and I mean that's the ideal. Of course. And again, Samson Raphael Hirsch, who I'm a huge fan of. Again, one of the beautiful points that he makes is that it's one of the few religions where the religion does not stoop to the people's it does not stoop to the morals of the people that are currently writing it, but it actually is always throughout history has been ideals that are higher than what most people have achieved. And and if we constantly have a higher mark that we're trying to get to, then all you can do is try to keep on improving. It's a really interesting idea, and it's a really beautiful fundamental concept, which is set yourself high goals and high standards that are going to be so difficult to reach and so challenging to reach that it'll take a long time to do it, because then you'll get yourself in habits of doing really productive things and behaving in really, really wonderful ways for an extended period of time, and along the way achieve happiness, along the way achieve community, along the way achieve building a future world that's better than the world that you're in today, and along the way creating and manifesting progress and love in life. I think and it's beautiful, and because that's so hard to live up to, and it's something that's so enticing at the same time, it doesn't make a difference. Those are notions that people are just going to be committed to. It doesn't matter if you're living in Spain or Yemen or Germany or Russia or Poland or Ukraine or America or Brazil or anywhere else in the world. just the fact that there are the values of we want to make a better world. That concept is not going to go anywhere. Like it's not. And I mean, I hope not. And when you're trying to strive for your ideals, the famous story of Hanukkah is, or at least the mainstream story and the popular story, the pop culture story, is that the Jews had one vat of oil that they were able to, that miraculously extended and burned for 8 straight days. And wow, that's amazing. Let's have some donuts and dreidels, right? Like, no, I mean, yeah, if that's the way you want to, if that's the way you want, if you're satisfied with that story and you're satisfied with that explanation, then by all means. And if you're not, then what I can offer you is another understanding, which is that the miracle, the miracle was not the point of the story. The truth is that because at the time, as is the case with religious experiences and customs and traditions, you have very specific rules and very specific ways that things should be done and have to be done for it to count. And I think part of the reason why you have this kind of specificity is because it creates this relationship between the actor and the action, and the more effort that you put into making sure that an action is performed properly, then the higher possibility there is that you're actually doing a better job performing it. Right? General surgeons are not as trusted as a specialty surgeon is, and and it's very simple, because he cares more about he spends more time, the doctor, the surgeon, she spent more time focusing and learning about that one particular area, and so you feel like you trust them to be nuanced in that area. And we try, and so with a lot of religious ceremonies, in order to be able to achieve the best results, you have to be very specific in what you're asking so that you can pull out the analytical, detail oriented, and quality parts of us. And so when we actually do perform and behave, it's done on a higher level. I think it's a really cool idea, and I think it's true. And I'm happy to change my mind on it. It's just something that I've thought about. It's something that I think sits with my intuition, and also has proven itself in my life many times over and over and over. The value, so you have olive, so they're supposed to light the candles in this Beis Hamikdash, in this tabernacle, in this religious structure, this palace of sorts that the Jews had. And it was supposed to be lit with a particular type of olive oil that didn't come in contact with anything that could have been potentially impure. Um, and we only had one vat of that. But the truth is that for the sake of lighting it, you could have, but hypothetically, for whatever reason, you could actually, you didn't have to use, in this particular case, you didn't actually have to use the most pure olive oil. You could have just used any kind of oil for the sake of this particular action, lighting this candle, lighting this menorah. And the goal is, or the point of the story is, the value of the Hanukkah story is, in a time and in a world where values, philosophy, religion, perspective are all being attacked and torn apart, good enough is not going to save you and your people. You don't settle for the average pilot when it comes to war. You don't settle for, when it comes to your family's safety. You don't settle for, oh, good enough, I'm fine. When the things that you truly care about deserve the best. You want the best for the things you care about. And for the Jewish people to have said good enough over the course of Hanukkah would have led, that in and of the actual event in and of itself didn't mean as much as what the general finger of what the pulse of society was, which I'm sorry, I'm going to try one more time because my head because I have all these thoughts in my head. I'm trying to get them out very clearly, so I do apologize. If everyone just settled for good enough, there wouldn't be any Jewish philosophy or religion left along the way. And because people to put cared passionately about it and about the values of Judaism at that time. And you could apply this to anyone. It doesn't have to be Jews. It could be anyone. It could be Americans. It could be Italians. It could be Englishmen. It could be Irish. It could be anyone. Um, if you care about your people, then you strive for greatness. You don't settle for good enough. And even when good enough will be acceptable, even when you could still graduate with your degree with a B average, if you care about the field that you love, if you love the field that you're studying, you'll probably get that A. You're probably not going to be happy settling for a C plus. And the people that say, um, you know, C's still a pass or whatever. I forgot there's an expression about just like C's fine as long as you get the piece of paper. I mean, yeah, on one hand, that is true. On the other hand, I would really hope that someone that got that C was not going to be the person that's going to be deciding the fate of the future of any philosophy or nationality or religion or anything like that. Not because the C is a problem, and not because but not just because the person that truly, truly cared wouldn't let themselves just get away with that and just call it a day. And good enough is not enough. And that's why I'm recording this episode now, and that's why and I actually struggle with this because I am inclined to think to myself good enough when I jog for if I jog for 5 days of the week, and I think to my I feel on the sixth and seventh day I don't need to jog. I already jogged 5 days. It's good enough. It's good enough. It's good enough. I don't need to do it. And I have to fight myself. I have to fight myself very, very frequently and say, good enough is not good enough. Good enough is not good enough. It's not enough to put out one episode this week. It's not enough to put out an episode and feel like you didn't explain all the points that you were trying to get across. It's not good enough to not reach out to new people and not get better, not better, I wouldn't say better, not to get new, fresh guests on the podcast constantly. It's not good enough to just keep on doing 4 to 5 episodes or solo episodes. And I know that, and I'm pushing myself to not. And I'm sure that'll make the difference between whether or not this podcast becomes successful or not. The same applies to everything. And at the end of the day, if I can't get anyone, then the podcast will die with me trying to. And if it gets nowhere for X amount of years, you know, it's only when I quit that it's over. I hope this episode made sense. I think it did, but in case it didn't, the very least I can offer is some good podcasts, some good book recommendations, link in the show note captions, and hopefully next week some really great and fun entertaining guests for all of you guys. Have a good weekend, guys. I'll talk to you soon.